Bradders no-nonsense hits. Only on Vitalize Radio.
Today I have a wonderful comedy actress joining me on the show. You may know this person best for playing Dorien Green in Birds of a Feather, or for her numerous musical and pantomime appearances in the UK. Of course, it is the lovely Lesley Joseph. A warm welcome to the show, Lesley. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm very well, thank you. I'm a bit tired because I've just done Addams Family at the Palladium, so
of course.
I'm just recovering from it, but I need a few days to get over it. It was such an extraordinary event, really. We had 3 shows, and it's sort of, wow, I've never had a reaction like it, so I'm recovering now. But I'm okay.
That's the main thing then, as long as you're okay. We will touch upon the Addams Family later on, but let's go right back to the beginning. Where did the comedy and acting start for you?
Oh gosh, well, I first went on stage at about 7 and sang a song that with my hands I clap, 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 with my feet I tap, 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 which was from Hansel and Gretel, and that was at the New Theatre, which is now knocked down in Northampton. And then I went to LAMDA. I did sort of drama all throughout my school years. I mean, I wanted to be an actress from the age of 4. And then I went to LAMDA. And then when I left, my first job was understudying Patsy Rollins and Denise Hurst in a review. And then I went into more serious stuff, but then somehow I found my way back into The Boyfriend and into musical comedy. And I mean, I did intersperse it with serious stuff, but comedy was always there because I love working with an audience. And then the last few years really have been so much musical comedy, so much so that I've now decided to go back to Shakespeare and Chekhov. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know, but it goes way back to the beginning. And I think, I've just always loved working with an audience, which is why I love pantomime.
Yes, definitely. Who doesn't love pantomime? It is absolutely great. We'll touch upon that as well later because that's been a big part of your life. I hope I'm correct in saying you've been in the industry for over 50 years now. So did you aspire to be in the TV or theatre industry during childhood?
Yeah, when I was about 4, then from 7, and that was always it. So much so the headmistress called my parents in when I was sort of in my teens and said, look, I don't think you should consider university or anything. I think Lesley wants to go into the business. She should go into show business. And then they completely accepted it, and we went down that route. And I used to enter competitions, and I remember winning a cup once for poetry speaking, and I joined the Mass Theatre, which I'm now patron of in Northampton, and did plays all through my teens. So I was always in the business, always. I always loved it. I did ballet when I was really young and then gave that up, which was a regret. But yeah, it's always been part of me. So I went to LAMDA and then came out, and that was it, and then started on the journey.
Oh, wow. So quite a confident child then as you were growing up?
Yeah, I think so.
People may know you best for playing Dorien Green, as I mentioned before, in the BBC sitcom Birds of a Feather. 129 episodes you were in, which is amazing. So how did that opportunity come to be?
Well, it was interesting. Gary Lyons and Stuart Permott, who were friends of mine, wrote something called Exclusive Yarns, which I did a little place called the Good Luck Theatre, which was in Covent Garden, and we transferred to the Comedy Theatre. And I had done a sitcom with Maurice Gran and Lawrence Marks, who wrote Birds. And I invited them along because I thought they could use the writers. Lawrence came with his wife, and I always remember it because they came to my dressing room afterwards, and Anne Charleston, who played Madge in Neighbours, was in there having a glass of champagne. And I played in this thing, it was called Exclusive Yarns, and a character who ran a wool shop in Primrose Hill. But she had huge hair, lots of makeup, long nails, lots of jewellery, and a very short skirt, exactly like Dorien. And Lawrence looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, that's the part to go with Paul and Linda that they were writing something for, because they'd done Shine on Harvey Moon together. They thought they were wonderful together. So they thought of this as being a third part to be placed in Chigwell and could be their next door neighbour. So they said to me, how would you feel about doing a sitcom? So I said, well, send me the script. So they sent me the script and I read it, and 5 minutes later I rang and my life changed, really. So that was sort of back in 1988. And we first went on screen in 1989. And gosh, in the first days, we used to play to over 20 million people because there were so few channels on the TV. We didn't have the sort of streaming thing that we have. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have Apple TV. We didn't have any of that. It was just a few channels. So it goes back, and that's why the advice I always give to somebody, that if a part has your name written on it, do it, because you never know what it can lead to. And that opened every door for me. My career changed, and I went into television. I did so much. I mean, light entertainment, such on television, travelled the world, did stuff for TVAM, and it was all from this one play in Covent Garden at a tiny, tiny theatre for no money, or job share. It was like, you shared the box office. So it was extraordinary the way it happened, yeah.
Wow. So a life-changing moment. And it must have been...
It really was.
It must have been such a great character to play as well.
It was, and when it first, when they first said, would you be interested in this? And I looked at it, and then Esther Charkham, who I still know was the producer, and we said, well, how are we going to, what's she going to look like? She said, well, the two main things she has to have are high heels and long nails. And when we're talking long nails, we're talking really long nails. So I had to have them put on, and they stayed on for 6 months, and they would grow, and then you'd have them changed every few months. But it made life almost impossible because they were so long. If you look at the early episodes, and huge heels, most of which are still in my wardrobe, which I don't dare wear now. Yeah. So we sort of developed the character a way round how she looked, and then what she was like, and the fact that she needed them far more than they needed her. And this character sort of grew and grew and grew and turned into Dorien Green.
Wow. So you mentioned about the nails being put on and everything, but did you have to take time to find the character in yourself?
Yes, I mean, a lot came out of the way it was written. A lot came out of the way I interpreted it. I was always very keen that it was never just a comedy character, that she would never sort of knock on the door, come in looking amazing, always say funny things and then go out again. It wasn't always the comedy neighbour. It was a person, a very fully constructed person, and that sometimes she would be quite sad, and sometimes you'd sort of see through the comedy and see a really lonely person inside. And so we were very keen, especially as it went on and became more successful, that we were always very careful the way we wrote it. I say we, I didn't write it, but we had quite an input into what the writing was, and we would have a read through. If we didn't like it, we'd always suggest and say, no, she wouldn't come in and say that, or they would never say that to each other. Can't we rewrite that scene? So we were always very, very keen. There was a scene where Pauline's character, Sharon, was staying over in Dorian's house because they'd had a fire in their kitchen. And Dorien said to her, there comes a time in people's life where people choose children or carpets. I chose carpets. And then instead of just thinking, oh, that was a funny line, it stayed for 10 seconds on her eyes, and in her eyes you could see that actually it wasn't the right choice at all, and that she made a wrong choice. Then, of course, further down the road, you found out she did have a daughter that didn't live with her anymore. So, when you have a series that lasts that long, characters are going to duck and dive out of things that you didn't think were right at some point, but then suddenly turn around and it changes a bit later on. So, we just wanted to make them very rounded characters, and it was just not all about comedy, although obviously it was a comedy sitcom, but we did want them to be real people and people to actually care about them.
Yeah. A lot of people loved it, and they still do, really.
Yeah, they do.
So from one big thing in your career onto another, which is musicals. You recently played the role of Mother Superior in Sister Act. How did you feel becoming a part of that cast?
Well, Sister Act is one of those really, really wonderful musicals that I think the word that everybody used to use, and don't forget we came at the end of COVID and at the end of 2 years of lockdown, was joyous, and it was that thing where they could relax. It wasn't with the music from the film because Alan Menken wrote separate music for the stage show, but it was fabulous, and nuns, and lots of people used to come along dressed as nuns, and it was and is, because I'm about to go back into it again, a really fun musical with lots of fun things. And as Mother Superior, I had 2 numbers. I'm going back in as Sister Mary Lazarus, who's the rapping nun, which I suppose was the one I really loved. because she did all the numbers and all the dancing, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
It's a really fun musical, but with a big heart. It tells a really good story. We had a wonderful cast when we opened at the event of Apollo. We had Clive Rowe, we had Beverly Knight, we had Jennifer Saunders, we had the lovely Lizzie B, who was Sister Mary Robert, who sings The Life I Never Led. It was a wonderful cast, and audiences absolutely loved it. And of course it was to be Whoopi Goldberg. Then COVID happened, and then Whoopi couldn't come over after that, so everything had to be recast. But it was a huge success, and then we toured it. I went to Mother Superior for a year and a quarter, actually, and now we're going back to the Dominion in the West End for 6 months. So I've sort of lived in the convent for quite a while now, apart from Cardiff Pantomime. So I was up the beanstalk then.
Yeah.
So life changed a little bit then.
Yes, of course. I think you can really tell that. Yeah, you see videos on YouTube, whether they should be there or not. You see them of the walk down, and people are absolutely cheering their lungs off, and they really do love this show.
Well, they do, and I think it's funny. Some shows, I mean, sometimes you ask people, producers, and you say, did you know that would be a success? And they say, no. If we knew what would be successful, we'd all be multi-billionaires.
Yeah.
You just don't know sometimes what will take off. And Sister Act has been one of those shows that for some reason, and probably because the music is fantastic and because it's unusual, somebody hides in a convent and there's a load of nuns who suddenly, become very caring about this person, and she takes after them and she sort of involves herself with them. And it's one of those shows that people just fell in love with, and so whenever it goes back on, it always does very, very well. And I think people just fell in love with the music. Music is fantastic. I mean, Alan Menken, who wrote the music, is royalty. Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, all the, Tale as Old as Time, all these songs that Alan Menken wrote. And of course, when we did it at the event and we came to see it twice, he loved it so much. So that was, and Glenn Slater came who wrote the lyrics. And the fact that they love it, that they saw a production, that they thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we want our production to be. So the one that we did just ticked every box, really. And also it came at a time, I remember when I came back into pantomime after the lockdown, people were terribly moved. We were on stage. I mean, we couldn't get through the whole of it because then again COVID hit, but people in the audience were just so desperate to get back into theatre. And I think once all that went away, I think people were desperate to get back and see something they knew, they loved, where they could relax and enjoy and remember how wonderful theatre is. And that's always been my joy, has been live theatre. Yeah. So I think Sister Act is just one of those shows that people absolutely adore.
Definitely. And is it true that you met the Pope at some point?
When I was doing Young Frankenstein in the West End, I had a call from my agent saying, would you like to do a show for the BBC, which would be 3 one-hour episodes, and it would be called Pilgrimage Road to Rome, and you travel from the Swiss Alps into Rome. Nothing to do with the Pope. It was just walking on a pilgrimage route, which was a Roman Catholic route called Via Francigena, and they had 8 people of all of different faiths. And I said I would love to, because I'd never been to Rome. So I did a little bit of training with walk. I mean, some days we would walk 12 miles, up hills, down hills, through forests. I mean, it was exhausting. The last 100 kilometres we had to walk. The first 6 or 7, whatever it was, because we didn't have time within the 16 days, we would travel in a coach sometimes, and we would walk a lot. We were in a different place to stay every night. And then when we got to Rome, and that was just so exciting. People can Google it and go on Catch Up or whatever and watch it. It was on the BBC, and we were told on the Monday night, tomorrow you're going to be meeting the Pope. Right. And we had half an hour with the Pope. Nobody has half an hour with the Pope. There were 8 of us, and we sat there. It's a long story, which probably haven't got time for now, but I ended up blessing him. Oh. I had a long conversation with him. I made him laugh a lot. I mean, it was one of those unique experiences that you don't think you will ever have, and suddenly it comes into your life. And I think if somebody said, and I would say this above Young Frankenstein, above Birds of a Feather, above Strictly Come Dancing, above all the things I've done, you can have one thing to take with you, it would be Pilgrimage Road to Rome, because it was such a unique experience. And then to have half an hour with the Pope, who was actually so nice and so human and answered the questions so well, and such a humble man. And we had an extraordinary half an hour with him, and I've got the medal that he gave me to celebrate his 6 years in the papacy. He just had 2,000 done. So yeah, that was a very, very unique experience. That's one of the wonderful things about if you achieve success in this business, then doors open that you would never ever expect. Nobody would ever expect that suddenly you'd be sitting what I call backstage in the Vatican. And the night before we went to the sacristy, again, you go through the Swiss guards backstage into the sacristy in the Vatican. I'd never been to Rome. I'd never been to the Vatican. And we were given the testimonies, which is now framed on my wall, to say that we'd walked the last 100 kilometres to Rome on the Via Francigena. And it's all in Latin. And those are the sort of experiences that you'll suddenly be offered, which are unusual and not what you expect, and they open some doors that you think, wow, this is so exciting. And that was just one of those times.
Yeah, a memory that'll stay with you for life then.
Oh, ever, forever.
You've also been performing, as you mentioned earlier, you've been in pantomime for around, 28 years or more?
More than that, probably.
Yeah, way more than that. Do you remember watching your first panto as a child?
Well, sort of and sort of not. There was a man called Lionel Hamilton who used to play the dame at the Royal Theatre, which I think is a Matron Theatre in Northampton. It's beautiful, very, very small, very traditional theatre. And I used to go and watch him. But my first ever show that I remember watching was something called Where the Rainbow Ends in the West End with Anton Dolin, who you probably won't know, but was a very famous ballet dancer. And he was in the West End, and that was the first thing I saw. And I queued up afterwards outside the stage door to get his autograph, which I have in a book, and that was very precious to me. And that was my first sort of musical thing, if you like. But I can't remember what the first pantomime was, but it was with Lionel Hamilton playing the dame.
Yeah.
And I think the first pantomime I ever did was Dames in the Wood. And I think his name was Terry Malloy, who used to be in the Archers, and I played these two babes. I don't think it's a title they ever do anymore.
Yeah.
And that was my first pantomime that I did. And then when I came back into commercial pantomime, a wonderful show that we did at the Birmingham Hippodrome, which was Dick Whittington.
Oh, yeah.
And that was glorious with John Nettles. And it was meant to be with Les Dawson, then me, then John Nettles. Les Dawson pulled out because he wasn't, and then very sadly he died. So I went to the top of the bill. So then there was John. We had Wolf the Gladiator, who had Wayne Sleep playing the cat. And you can imagine the dancing he did. We had Vince Hill playing the Baron. We had Rosemary Ford, because in those days you had a girl playing the principal boy. She was huge on television. So she played Dick Whittington. And yeah, it was an amazing show. We had, I remember a scene under the sea. Under the sea, we had that. And I had a scene with Neptune. I remember wearing flippers. I still got it on a tape. And that was one of the greatest pantomimes I've ever done.
Yeah.
And John Nettles and I stayed together for ages doing it, and he used to love it. And of course, he's a Shakespeare. He'd Midsummer Murders, but he was a serious Shakespearean actor.
Yeah.
And he, for ages and ages, he would do pantomime playing King Rat. He used to love it, take it really seriously, as do I, because although it's pantomime, it's to be done properly. It's an art. It's working with an audience. It's knowing when to push the audience forward. It's knowing when to pull them back in. It's knowing when to let them laugh and then suddenly turn on sixpence and make them go, ooh, especially when you're playing a baddie. So it really is an art, and it's one I take really seriously, and I've done it every year since, except for the year I did Young Frankenstein.
I must say, my producer and I came to watch you in Jack and the Beanstalk, and that was...
Oh, did you?
Yes, we did. That was spectacular.
No.
How did that go for you? How did that run go?
It was lovely. It was a much smaller one that I've done for a long time, because I've been playing Milton Keynes, Birmingham Hippodrome, Southampton, Bristol. I've done a lot of very big ones, and I loved that one because it was really back to being very traditional with the wonderful Mike Doyle.
Yes.
And my favourite part of all of it was If I Could Talk to the Animals. when he did the scene with a pig and a dog. And I used to watch it every night in the wings. And that was pure heaven for me. And yes, it had been a long time since I played a goodie, because I'd been a baddie in Snow White, Wicked Queen. That's what I'm doing this year.
Yeah.
So it was very much always playing baddies for me for a long time. So this was back being into a goodie. And I really enjoyed it. I loved all the lip syncing stuff. Yeah, we had a lovely, lovely time. And of course, it's a beautiful theatre. And while we were there, the theatre celebrated its 117th birthday.
Wow.
Which was extraordinary. 117 years, and looking out, seeing a packed house, which was lovely. No, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I love Cardiff. I mean, we did Sister Act to the Millennium there. In fact, 3 weeks before we opened Pantomime, I was at the Millennium doing Sister Act.
Oh, wow.
And then I went into Jack and the Beanstalk.
Have you got a favourite panto role to play then?
I love Snow White. I love the Wicked Queen in Snow White, because you can do comedy and you can do baddie. So you can do both. But I love them all. I mean, there are some that I've never done. I've never done Aladdin. I don't know what I'd play, and that's probably one of the genies or something. What else haven't I done? I've never played a baddie in Dick Whittington, like King Rat or Queen Rat or something. That would be fun. Yeah. I'd love to do one I haven't done, which is why I was thrilled to do Jack and the Beanstalk, because I've never done Spirit of the Beats. So that was lovely. It was lovely to work with the company. But I suppose if I had to choose one, it would be Snow White, except that is very exhausting, because one thing with Spirit of the Beans, I didn't change my costume for every scene, but when you do a baddie, every time she comes on, she's got a new costume on. Yeah. So it's always, whenever you're off, you can't just sit and relax, you always have to change. And also, it is slightly more exhausting, because there's a lot more energy that you have to pump out to be a baddie than you do to be a goodie.
Yes, definitely.
But I think if I had to choose, it would probably be that.
So you've worked with some of the industry's greats. Has there been a favourite person to work with?
I would have to say Mel Brooks. He's an absolute icon, and he wrote Young Frankenstein. That's what I did in the West End, playing Frau Blücher, and I had him, and Susan Stroman, of course, who is again an iconic Broadway director. So that was amazing. I think in terms of the acting side of it, working with Pauline and Linda over a period of 30 years, I have to say was very special, because we created something new. We created amazing characters that lasted so long. So if I had to choose, I would say those two.
Yeah. You've also recently played, very recent to when we're recording, Grandma Addams alongside Michelle Visage,
Yes.
and a great cast in the concert version of the Addams Family at the London Palladium.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was extraordinary. So I had, after Pantomime, I had 5 weeks off before starting Sister Act, which we start on Monday. And they came through, and I'd never done a show at the Palladium. And The Addams Family, again, is an iconic musical. And Grandma's a tiny part, but it's fun. And I thought, do you know what? I've never worked for the producers. I'd never worked with the director. I'd never done The Addams Family. I'd never done a show at the Palladium. It ticked so many boxes. And we had 2 weeks of rehearsal, which was the most intense. And then it was to be a concert, but actually it wasn't a concert. It was like a fully staged show. Right. I loved it because they have the ancestors. I don't know if you know it.
Yes, yes.
But I love the ensemble. Were not just ensemble, they were ancestors. They were people from the family. And Elizabethan, just all ballet dancer, all these people who were the ancestors of the Addams Family, who come out once a year. Then they couldn't get back until there was love on the stage, and they join in all the choreography. They're in all the scenes. It was just glorious, and we had 2 weeks to put it all together. I'd always wanted to work with Ramin Karimloo because he's a legend within musical theatre. Michelle Visage I knew anyway because I did Strictly with Anastasia, and they were friends, and that's when I first met Michelle. And she always said, "Oh, I love you. I want to play your daughter who goes to America." So when I said yes to Addams Family, I messaged her and said, "Guess who's playing your mother?" So we've been so excited. But it had the most insane reaction I think I've ever experienced on a stage. they just went berserk.
Yeah.
And obviously there were a load of Michelle fans, a load of, from RuPaul's Drag Race, a load of Ramin fans, and then the tabs went up, and there we were standing as a family. They went mad again. And Addams Family has such a fan base, and I think it's great that if, let's say, you haven't got an unlimited run, or you haven't got a 6-month run at the Palladium or something, when you have these odd dates, to be able to put concert versions in. Although this was billed as a concert, but actually it was a fully staged production.
Yeah.
This glorious backcloth. The only thing it didn't have was a fully created set, but there was a set. And it was a completely, fully staged thing. It was like going to see a production of the Addams Family. And yes, people went absolutely mad. It was great fun. I think we're still a bit high from it. We're on our WhatsApp group all messaging every day saying, oh my God, I haven't recovered yet. And Michelle's gone off to New Zealand. Ramin's gone off to America.
Right.
So yeah, it was fantastic.
Definitely. It sounds great, and I've been to watch the normal Addams Family, just the normal stage production before,
right.
And that was great. But to see it, I only saw pictures and a few clips, but to see it at the London Palladium with spectacular lighting and the right cast, it just looked awesome. It
really was, and I looked at the cast. We had a glorious cast. Sam Buttery, who was playing Fester, who was fantastic. And yes, some wonderful young talents, and every single person in the cast was at the top of their game. And normally there's one or two that, you know, you'd never say anything, but you think, oh, blah, blah, blah. But with this, it was just, everybody was just fantastic. And the ancestors were wonderful. So yeah, it was incredibly special. Actually, it's going on my tick list of those very special experiences that you've had. It not quite with the Pope, but it's certainly going on my tick list.
Wow, yes. So being on that London Palladium stage, and being on any stage really, do you still get quite nervous going on, even with the experience?
Yes and no, really. Not really nervous. I mean, yes, you're always nervous that you're going to remember everything, that the audiences are going to like you, etc. But I wouldn't say I get catatonic with nerves. Yeah. There's always that slightly heart beating faster when you're opening, and as soon as you've done the opening night, then you go, oh, that's fine, I can do it, they like me, blah blah blah, it works. And if it doesn't, you work on it and make it work. But I do get nervous, but not hugely so. I get nervous, but with nerves I can cope with.
Yeah, it's enough nerves to keep you on your toes to do the show properly. Yeah. So I heard you mention about Panto earlier, where you're going. What's next for you? Is there any exciting projects coming up?
I'm looking forward to doing Sister Act at the Dominion, because all the whistles and bells will be back in it. Sometimes when you take something on the road, if you play in a smaller theatre, you can't have the cloisters in the back because there just isn't the space.
Yeah.
So it's always adaptive. But when you're playing in one place as big as the Dominion, you know you can have the whole set back, and that's always very exciting to go back into that.
Yeah. So Sister Act, and then a very well-deserved rest for you.
Yes.
Brilliant. We've had a question through from one of the listeners. Sam says, what has been the funniest thing to happen on stage during your career?
Oh, one of the funniest probably was when my wig came off when I was doing Cinderella at the Richmond Theatre, which was the year before I did the big one at Birmingham Hippodrome.
Yeah.
And I was playing Fairy Godmother, and Michaela Strachan was Cinderella. And she was in the kitchen in her rags, and I came on and said, Cinderella, you shall go to the ball, and threw my cloak off, and it threw the wig off with it. And of course, underneath you've got pin curls, pair of old stockings, pair of old tights on your head.
Yeah.
And of course, the audience just collapsed. Michaela practically wet herself. And it took about 5 minutes to get everything under control. And then, of course, the ponies came on and they put their tails up and did their business all over the stage. Yeah. So the end of that one was a complete disaster. But and I remember there were two people, and somebody said they were sitting near them, and one turned to the other and said, my God, she'll do anything for a laugh. So they obviously thought I'd kept it in on purpose, but No, it wasn't something I'd done at all. It was so that was one of them. And you know what? I can't even remember now. But there have been times when I've dried on stage. I remember once in Panto, I had to go off stage 7 times before I could remember the line.
Oh, wow.
My head just went blank.
Yeah.
And then when I was in Bromley singing the first number, and I was in the middle of the song, and I thought, I can't remember what I do next. So I just sang, I can't remember what the lines are, so I'm just going to dance. And I just danced instead. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about pantomime. You can ad-lib, and the audience love it when things go wrong and they go with you. But yeah, I think probably the wig coming off was the most ridiculous thing happening.
Yeah. It's special for the audience then as well. If you do an ad-lib for
they love it. I mean, when things like that, but that's live theatre.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get that anywhere. You don't get that on television or film. Live theatre, anything can happen in front of you. And that's why, and also so often when people say, oh, playing the audience, you know where you're going to get the laughs, then you say, no, you don't. You don't, because every single audience is different. You never have the same audience. You never have, even you might go to Manchester and you might think that every Mancunian audience will laugh at this and the other, but no, everyone is different. So you're constantly on your toes, constantly having to think ahead. And part of that is why I love theatre. So you constantly work with an audience. Yeah, so it's always different and it's always exciting.
Do you have any advice for those wanting to maybe get into the industry at all?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, if you want to get into the industry, only do it if you really want to. Don't go into it because you want to be famous or, you want to make money. Go into it because you love show business, whether you go in as a dancer, a comedian, an actor, however, or a stage manager, whatever you do. Learn your craft. I mean, I think it's really important. For example, you have the Oliviers. It's really important you know why they're called the Oliviers after Laurence Olivier. It's really important you learn about the great actors that have come before, who've paved the way, why theatres could be called the Gillian Lynn Theatre. Learn about those people that were huge in the business. Always learn by watching. If you can, stand by the side of the stage and watch how people work, how they work with an audience. And always learn in rehearsals by watching, by doing, by learning. Never turn down a job if it's got your name written on it, because I'm a pure example of that. With Exclusive Yarns, I did it for job share in the Good Luck Theatre and it changed my life.
Yeah.
So if you've got a job with your name on it, do it. And then try and invite people to come along and see it, which is what I did. And then my career changed. So, but take it seriously and only go into it if you really love it and find out about theatre and learn about it and just immerse yourself into it.
That's some great advice. Thank you very much. Well, Lesley, thank you for taking the time to have a chat. Hopefully you can join me again on the show, but for now, I hope that any upcoming projects, including Sister Act, go well for you. And a massive thank you for coming on the show.
And it's really been a delight to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lesley.
Bradders No Nonsense Hits. Only on Vitalize Radio.